So, my name is Lisa Cooney. I'm an Agile coach. I've been an Agilist for about 5 years, and I'm pretty active in the local Agile community here in DC. I would invite anyone who's sitting down, if you want to come closer. I'm going to show a fun video. You don't have to, but so this talk is about cognitive bias. It's about how your brain works. And I'm going to start by showing you a video, so you're going to experience a little cognitive illusion for yourself. Then I'm going to define cognitive bias. And then at the end, I'm going to relate it all back to Agile. Uh-oh. Let's get this on. All right. How many of you have seen this video? Anybody? Okay. So I have a special request for those of you who've seen the video that you're quiet. Okay, during this next part. This is a video of kids playing basketball. We're going to see two teams. One team's wearing white shirts. The other team is wearing black shirts. While you watch this video, you have a very important task, which is to count the number of passes between the players wearing white. So in your mind's eye, I'd like you to envision two columns, one column for bounce passes, one column for straight passes. All right? So you count the number of bounce, number of straight. After we watch the video, we'll see who got the closest. And it's really important that you watch this video in complete silence, not just for the people who've already seen it, but for everyone else as well, to let people focus and concentrate on counting. Okay, you with me? You ready to go? Good? Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, how many passes did you get? How many bounce passes? We'll start with those. Anybody? 3? 2? Yeah? Okay, it was 2. All right, how about straight passes? 15? 18? That's pretty close. You guys are good. It's actually 17. All right. So I'd like to request everyone who saw the video for the first time tonight, please stand up. Okay, so this question is just for the people who are standing. Of the people who are standing, did any of you see anything unusual? Yes. What did you see? A gorilla. Okay. How many of you did not see the gorilla? I did not see the gorilla. A lot of you are looking at me like, what? Okay. So let's watch the video again. All right, so they're playing, you're counting, you're focusing on the players wearing white, and you've got those two columns in your mind, bounce passes, straight passes, and you're really focused on this. And then, in comes the gorilla. Okay, so what you just experienced is a cognitive bias called inattentional blindness. And this happens when we direct our attention to a task at hand, and then we fail to perceive unexpected events. The brain notices only the things that we choose to pay attention to. This has had a lot of implications in society. It changed our cell phone laws for distracted driving, and also has had a big influence on how eyewitness testimony is handled. All right, now we're going to watch another video. Has anybody in the room seen this video? Okay, well, you were at my talk the other week, so. Okay, so again, I'd like to request that you do it in silence. This is 20 seconds long. Similar video. Again, I want you to count the number of passes between the players wearing white, number of straight, and number of bounce passes. Okay, ready? Here we go. Okay. Almost done. Alrighty. So if you saw the video for the first time, the second video tonight, could you stand up? Okay, so this question is just for the people standing up. How many of you saw the unicorn? Okay, there was no unicorn. I'm just kidding. Okay. How many of you saw the gorilla? Okay. I see not all hands went up, and that's pretty common. When I watched this to count the number of passes, I didn't see the gorilla, even though I knew the gorilla was going to be there. I didn't even see it. Now, again, for the people who are standing up, did any of you notice anything else unusual? Yes? The background curtain color changed. The curtain changed color. Yep. Anybody else? Anyone else? Yes, there was one less player. One of the players walked off. Okay, so we're going to go back to the beginning. See how it's red now? Yes, you can sit down. We're going to watch it again. So you're concentrating, and the curtain changes color slowly, right? And you're not paying any attention to that curtain, so of course you don't notice it. And as they're playing and the gorilla comes off, watch. See the player walks off the side there? So this shows you the power of inattentional blindness. It's a function of how our brains work, and you can't really control it. So even though you know that you're subject to the cognitive bias of inattentional blindness, you still are not protected from it. You're still going to experience it. So let me just define cognitive bias here by starting with what it is not. It is not the same thing as a racial bias or a prejudice, a learned type of bias that can be unlearned, right? There's no real moral aspect to cognitive bias. Cognitive bias is related to the hardwiring of our brain, how we've evolved over the eons, how we all, not everyone, but most of us tend to think in similar ways. And so cognitive bias is always present even when we know about it. Now, there's an agile technique that overcomes a common cognitive bias. The bias is the halo effect, which says that we tend to give too much weight to first impressions. We believe people who speak confidently and who speak first. So the way that we overcome that, as I said before, I'm an Agile coach, and a lot of times Agile coaches will bring stickies and we'll put them around the room, and everybody has to write down all their ideas in silence on the stickies. They might even put them up on the wall and do some affinity mapping in silence. And what that does is it enables all the ideas in the room to emerge and to be valued equally and considered equally by the group, instead of potentially falling prey to the halo effect. Now, confirmation bias is one of the most common biases. And in this one, we see evidence of what we already believe. This is one that's commonly discussed in the media when we're talking about politics. We ignore evidence that doesn't conform with our beliefs, and we believe things that align, or we focus on the evidence that aligns with what we already believe. So cognitive bias research focuses on uncovering these types of biases and figuring out, like, how does our brain really work? There's a couple of really great books on this topic. Thinking Fast and Slow is my favorite. If there's one book you decide to read on the topic of cognitive bias, I see some nods, so some people have read it. It's a great book. Daniel Kahneman got a Nobel Prize for economics. Interestingly, he's a psychologist, and in this book he summarizes 30 years of his psychological research on these types of topics with his colleague Adam Tversky. Now, another book I really love is Visual Intelligence by Amy Herman. She's a lawyer and an art historian and gave talks at museums, and one day there was a police captain in her audience, and he was so impressed by the way she interpreted this painting, he asked her to come work with his police officers to teach them how to analyze a crime scene using the same techniques. Amy makes a very important distinction between an observation and a perception. In a perception, we bring in our knowledge, our background, our beliefs. So, for example, with the gorilla video, an observation might be that 3 people were wearing white shirts, 3 people were wearing black shirts. A perception might be that they were playing basketball. Now, if you think about it, were they really playing basketball? I mean, there was no hoop. There didn't seem to be much competition. There were 2 balls. You know, so sometimes when people offer perceptions as observations, but actually they're bringing in some of their own background and telling themselves a story about what they think is going on. We make assumptions about what's happening in the world all the time. It's based on our prior knowledge, our experiences, and everything about us that makes us the unique people that we are. We tell ourselves a story, and if it's a good story, we believe our story. The illusion of understanding happens when we believe our own story instead of believing the evidence or listening to the perceptions of other people. And cognitive bias can happen when there's a mismatch between the story that we're telling ourselves, that we're making up, and what's really going on. Now, the hindsight bias happens when we look in the past and we notice cause and effect, and we see this like linear procession of cause and effect, and it gives us the illusion that we understand completely what happened and that we can predict the future. So, ironically, the hindsight bias, by definition, is about predicting the future and how bad we are at it, basically. We can't know how things might have turned out differently because there's just a myriad ways things could have gone differently and gotten a different outcome. And our brain is hardwired to ignore the things we don't know. So for people like me who missed the gorilla in the first video, if somebody said to me what happened, my story would not include a gorilla. Actually, the second time I saw the video, I thought it was a different video because I just couldn't believe it was there. So if you think about this from an evolutionary psychology point of view, it kind of makes sense because as we evolved, we had to make snap judgments. Our world was fairly stable for eons, right? And we had to look out and decide, is something going to kill us or not? And, you know, we had to make snap life or death decisions. Now we live in a world where we get more information, more new information that we have to process in a single day than our ancestors used to get in a whole lifetime. So these cognitive biases, these hard wirings of our brain, are somewhat maladaptive to modern life. We always know less than we think we do. It's just the nature of being a human being. We can't fully understand the past. We can't know everything that happened, and we certainly can't know how things might have been different if things had gone differently, and we don't know what the different outcomes might have been. And the future is much harder to predict than we think. So what we need to do is remain as aware as possible of our own tendency to have cognitive bias and also of other people's tendency to have cognitive bias so that we can take steps to overcome them. We can become less confident that we truly understand things, and that enables us to be more open to diverse points of view and make better decisions. And actually, in some cases, get closer to the truth. So now Amy Herman talks about this technique where you're trying to figure out what's going on. You look first, you talk to other people, find out what they think, get more information, and you look again. So if you think about it, like my perspective is only, metaphorically, right? It's only what I can see here. So if there was something going on behind me, none of you would be able to see it, right? And each one of you have your own unique perspective. And if there was somebody walking back and forth right now in a gorilla suit, most of you wouldn't be able to see it, but I would know about it, right? So what we need to do is be open to the perspectives of other people. We need to accept that we probably don't know as much as we think. We probably don't understand the past as well as we think we do. We probably can't predict the future that well. But if we pool together our resources and collaborate and share information with each other, we can get a little closer and we can make better decisions. All right, so now, excuse me, we're going to do one more fun thing. I'm going to show you a picture. This is actual photograph, and I'd like you to just call out what you see. This is a picture of a thing. So what do you see in this picture? Cow? Anybody else? Anything else? A what? A bear claw? Okay. A kitty cat? Anyone else? A Rorschach test? It's like looking at the clouds. Okay, so raise your hand if you're not quite sure what this is a picture of. Okay, so a lot of you. I didn't see anything in the picture either. Okay, so this is called Renshaw's cow. A psychologist named Renshaw went around showing this to all different people around the world, and very few people were able to see the cow. It is an actual photograph. Interestingly, kids could, 4 and under could see the cow, typically. I guess kids like cows. They would look at it, say, oh, it's a cow, and run away. So can everyone see the cow now? You see the ears and the snout and everything? Okay. So I'm going to challenge you. I would like you to stare at this picture and unsee the cow. Try to put yourself in the frame of mind you were just a few minutes ago when you couldn't see the cow. It's really hard, right? Once you see something, it's almost impossible to remove your perception of it. People are very bad in general at being able to describe their past states of mind and the things that they used to believe. They substitute what they believe now instead. Now, many of you are probably familiar with the Agile Manifesto. Yeah? All right. So the Agile Manifesto kind of guides us in our Agile journeys. And sometimes people interpret these values as a polarity. So they'll see in this case, for example, processes and tools are bad, individuals and interactions are good. Wrong, right. You know, people will often interpret that way, but if you look at the actual Agile Manifesto, there is value in the items on the right. They're important. So what they're trying to say here is that when you have a choice, you have to pick between a process and an individual. You're going to err on the side of the individual. You're going to value people more. But it's not saying that process and tools are unimportant. So there's another cognitive bias called Theory-Induced Blindness. And what this bias says is that once we've adopted a theory and used it as a tool in our thinking, it is extraordinarily difficult to notice its flaws. Over time, we will have more trust in the body of experts who've accepted that theory than we will in the evidence right in front of our eyes. We will discount that evidence and stick to the theory. Now imagine if you don't even understand the theory, right? If you're interpreting this agile value, for example, as a polarity, as a right and wrong, and you're subject to theory-induced blindness, now you've got yourself in a hot mess. So what you need to do is pay attention to the things that you choose to pay attention to, because you're all subject to these cognitive biases just like I am, because it's part of being a human being. And all you can really do to learn to overcome them is learn about cognitive bias and develop some techniques to help you not have them influence key decision making and important work that you're doing with your teams. Thank you very much.